I would like to present you, and I have the chance to speak after Luke, Maria, and Siegfried, as the presence of Italian architects and architectures in Bangkok. Actually, in the last period of the 19th, in the late 19th centuries and starting of the 20th, as it was already done. There is no reason to come again over the history, the general history of the cooperation and between Western countries, and Thailand and Siam, and then Thailand. And at the same time, I would like to apologize. I'm not using first sources, so I'm using publications and other materials, and that's quite interesting because I was quite sure, reading the Italian and some of English sources, that there is a curious position, and I would like to make a reference with you, because through the reference of Italian sources, they're not really open. They look like the Italians there were the only Western there, and actually they were at the highest number of Italian there at the same time. So were 35, following the nowadays Italian ambassador in Bangkok. Therefore, crossing where the information given us by Luke, they were at the most, they were less than 10% of European there. But let's go on the presentation, if I will be able to do it, apparently. Yes. It's okay for you, I suppose, and I hope. So I will present you just a short interaction between royal families, and then three histories. Three histories goes, three stories, sorry, something really partial. I will not be as performant as the former speaker, but I will just give you some flash over different symbols of a different building there. We will talk about some bridges and the door, the royal palace, partially inside and partially outside, and a school of art. I'm proposing you something that looks like interesting in how the Italians were involved, and how the Italians were working there. So I try to visualize the presence of Italians there. So you can see the series of the three main the three kings involved in this period that were ruling in this period. There were the two vertical lines about the voyages in Europe in 1897 and in 1907, but already this was already presented by Luke and Siegfried, and then I would like to show you at the different count. We have I just took roughly 10 references over the 10 references that look like the more important there. There is that in green we have the engineers. That's the starting part, where engineers. Then we have a group of architects, led apparently by Mario Tamagno, and they were coming a little bit later, and then some pure artists like painters. So we have the starting of Italian cooperation with Italian. They started during the period of King Rama IV, with the presence of Gerolamo Gerini, that was a soldier, an engineer of the Kingdom of Sardinia. And Kingdom of Sardinia, because up to 1861, the Kingdom of Italy were not existing. Italy also, like Germany, is quite a new country. And actually, in the sources, you will find references in between Siam and Sardinia, not with Italy, because up to the 1871, when Rome became a part of Italy, the name of the kingdom, the family, the royal family, used the former title. So we can see, and it's the green flash that the green flash that post there, I'm just showing there, to engineers, Girolamo Gerini, and then Carlo Allegri. Carlo Allegri was important because he was working as engineer for bridges, and the most of his work was actually on bridges in Bangkok. I discovered that also Ayutthaya was called Venice of the East, and we can find also Bangkok as Venice of the East. And actually, both are fantastic towns like Venice, so not a problem. It's just to make a reference. That's the big town that we see today. If we go there as a tourist, as I was, don't give the idea of a very water-oriented town. Then in green, we have the part of the presence of architecture, Italian architect there. And actually, Mario Tamagno, that is the reference that's the most used on the Italian sources, but that's not considered as important on the book made by the Italian at the court of Siam, done by Paolo Pizzardi. That's quite interesting because it was the Italian reference of culture at the Italian embassy in Bangkok up to 10 years ago, and he's still now a reference. And he's not using Mario Tamagno as a reference, but we have him on other sources. And actually, he was hired by the Kingdom of Siam in order to manage the Ministry of Construction. And he called, of course, some other architects working with him, and the largely well-known with him were Annibale Rigotti, who arrived there 7 years later, and Ercole Manfredi, who arrived a little bit later, but he was married with a Thai lady, and he spent all his life there up to 1973 when he died. And a little bit different speech can be done for the painters that arrived there together with the architects, and at the same time in charge of paint inside the architecture, the new architecture that were going on to be built, but also to interact with Siam artists in order to produce the interchange of culture that was wished to be more modern. That's why I put this image on the left of the screen that show Cesare Ferro with that his painting and his making a portrait of King Rama V. I like to think that the portrait is the one who is shown there, but we have no proof. So I just decided to took it together. But what is really interesting is that we can see backside of Cesare Ferro, the Italian painter, a Thai painter that's painting at exactly the same subject and exactly at the same time. That means it's something that's really interesting because it's a really infrequent image that talk about the interaction and the interaction on the Orientalism. That's something that's really important, and it's something that's really interesting for the building of the vision of the world that we have in the 20th century. At the same time, just for information, it's interesting because at the expositions, the world expositions that was done in Turin in 1911, and just remember Turin was a capital of Italy in Turin as the residence of Kingdom of Italy. The family comes from Turin. That was the first capital of Italy. That the exposition was there was an exposition in 1911, and you can see in the image the pavilion, the Palace of Siam. There was the pavilion of Thailand, done by Mario Tamagno, who was living in Bangkok, but built in Turin, his born town. A special place for a cooperation has to be given to Corrado Ferrucci. Corrado Ferrucci arrived in Thailand in 1924, in charge of the internal decoration of the new buildings, and actually he lived there. He decided to stay there. He changed his name in Silpa Birarsi, and again I apologize for pronunciation, and he spent all his life there. Actually, he came back to Italy, and then he traveled back to Bangkok. But it's really interesting that he was sharing completely on his life the double culture. Actually, he changed the name during the Second World War because of the official end of the Second World War. That's for the Kingdom of Italy. It's in September 1943. So there were really a lot of architecture built by Italian architects there, and some of the images that we already seen came from there. And starting from this temple that Luke was talking about, the marble temple, done by the trio Rigotti, Tamagno, and Manfredi, and designed, following the design of the Prince Nalishara Nuva Tigongse. But actually what is important is that there was an interaction. It was the idea, and was that it committed the person, the reference, the owner, and the reference with locals were totally open, and it was not connected to the usual colonial way of building that we had at that time. Because of we have a lot of building and not a lot of time, I decided to present you only one building, because it's a very aesthetical one, and it's quite interesting, because in 1926, in a perfect new Gothic, new Venetian Gothic style, there was the building that was done. There was committed, the Villa Norasing, that's nowadays Thai government house, that was done in a modern Gothic and new Gothic with a style, with a lot of marble coming from Italy and from Carrara, actually. And it's interesting because the drawing that you can see on the right side, the technical drawing, show exactly a Venice palace with the starting of the idea of exchange with locals. And it's really interesting because Manfredi, in an interview that was done in 1969, so 50 years later, he was quite apologizing to the Thais for the way that they used to impose their way of building a villa there. And it's quite interesting. This is still used. It's used by Thai government, and this is the image today. That's absolutely respecting the drawing and the conception that was done in this one century before, in the 20s. And so I just start to give you a little stories as we're coming to an interesting point of view. That was the arriving there of the first Italians, led by Carlo Allegri, that was an engineer trying to propose new buildings, the buildings of several number of new bridges. That was following the request, the local request to make an infrastructure for a new modern town, a new modern city. What is interesting that we can see the arriving there, the arriving in Thailand of technical industrial production and bridges, in iron bridges and concrete bridges. And actually there was a great production. So as I told you, the Thafan Lilat Bridge done by Carlo Allegri in 1907. 1907, I just remember you, it's the year of the second trip of the King of Thailand in Europe and in Italy. And actually we had the chance as Italian to receive him as the first nation and the last nation in Europe, because traveling by boat and by Egypt, by the Suez Canal, it's quite normal pass by Italy. It's a geographic advantage that we had. And actually, we can see also on left side of the screen a bridge over Klong Magnak. That's a totally concrete building that was built by the Henbik, with the Henbik technologies in the first part of the year there. The Henbik technology that was sold outside of France, of course, and an Italian architecture engineer, Porchetto, coming from Sardinia, took the right and transposed his right of building with this technology in Thailand. So he built there too. And because of you will have the chance, if I understood, to see a movie that the Embassy of Italy produced and published this year. It was presented for the first time in May 2022, Me and the Magic Door. That's the people in Bangkok would see it. And I'll use it just to make the connection with the next image, but also to tell that our interest for the exchange is not only our estrade of specialists, but it's something that's going on also with the embassies and the other European references there in Thailand. And what I think really interesting, that's why I just put there that they decided to use an actor who make references, and you can see his white image on the right bridge down right, that he is in theory, he represents the Italian architect who drive the people and the history moving inside Bangkok. Actually, the references is Mario Tamagno. There's an important architect who worked there in Thailand from 1900, the first year of the 20th century, up to 1925. Actually, some other sources are telling about 24, but that's not really important. And I would like to present you an image that you already saw in other presentation this morning or this afternoon for someone. The great throne hall that was built in a style that's mixed in between what in Italy we call liberty, that's the Art Nouveau in Italian source, and something that neoclassical style, so something that's changing, and that was done starting from 1907 and ended in 1916, so it was a 9 years building. And what is interesting to see, the big image, as the big photo in black and white, was done in 1916, so that's the image when the build was when the image was completely, it stopped something on my screen, but sorry. And actually, what is interesting that we can find a series of images that are put on the left. That's what I try to respect the X of the cupola of the X of the building. And what I think, what I find really interesting is the 30 images starting from the high. That's the image of the structure that was done in order to allow this kind of very, very heavy building to stay on the strange and not strong field and land that we have in Bangkok. So if you can see, starting from the low of the image, we have a plan. The plan, it's the plan of the throne hall, and this is the plan of the handbag system of pick that was concrete was that was sticked inside the ground in order to support the structure. And together with Tamagno and Rigotti, it's interesting, for some years worked in Turin, in Italy, so they were working together with a double study of architecture, part of in Bangkok and part in Turin, and together with the painter Galileo Chini, that painted the places inside and clearly the cupola and something else. And it allows me to pass to the next image that will talk a little bit about Chini and the Far East. As I told you, it's really interesting to see how the idea of Orientalism has keep in together with the reference with the Thai state, with Siam at that period, because it was not only a one-way Orientalism way of thinking, if we make reference to Edward Said and his Orientalist book. And but it was also an exchange, and a chosen exchange. So if we keep Chini as a painter, apparently during his trip, his great long trip in Europe, the King Rama V in 1907 was to the Venice Biennale, and he was really captured and fascinated by the work of the La Sala del Sogno, the room of the dream, the dream of the room, no, the room of the dream, that was done by Chini, that was responsible for the Biennale there in 1907 from that room of Biennale. And so the King Rama IV decided and hired Galileo Chini to make the internal part of the throne hall, and you can see the throne hall on right side. And he painted, actually, he left Italy in 1910 for some years, and goes to Siam and to Bangkok with Carlo Rigoli. He worked together with another painter, and actually he painted there. You can see a little bit better the way that the painting was crossing the different style of of image of art that we had at that period. And he tried to mix the local art with the European one, something that was Sigrid was talking about in the end of his presentation. That's actually what we can see now. The heritage that we have, it's an heritage that was effectively shared, more shared, less shared, etc., but it was shared and was mixed in between the different kind of art. And we can have different modern, and of course for Western and for Italian, as I am, that's quite normal to see the references in the sky. For example, the reference of the sky that Giotto designed in the Cappella dei Scrovegni, that's near Venice, and at the same time, and the image that we have on the lower side of this fresco, we can see, we can understand the references of the Byzantine kind of picture, and that we have in Ravenna, for example. And it's interesting that, of course, Thai nowhere of the people who know Thai largely more than me, the art of Thailand, can can see and understand the reference to the local art. And that's something really interesting for the different kind of Orientalists that we have. Of course, during that period, Kini as a painter goes on with the study of Orient art, etc., and the Orient vision. And it's quite interesting. I have a pleasure just to show you something that happened last year, an exposition that was done in Prato, near Florence, in 2021, that I find really interesting, because he put in references the way of the presentation. Last year, it was 1 century of the composition and the presentation of Turandot, a great opera written by Puccini. But because of the presence of Kini, Puccini is this reference to Turandot. Turandot, it's an opera that's in the Central East Asia. Is the ambience of it, the environment of the opera is in the Central East of Asia, and therefore they realized it in the show last year, that all the paint references of the first representation work that was done in 2021 in 1921 in Scala in Milano, all the the artistical references and the scene were designed by Kini because he was coming back from Far East, from Bangkok. So he brought back the idea of Orientalism. So it was a great exchange, a shared heritage, as we're talking. And the last one about it's a really fast presence is the strange figure, the strange image of this person, Corrado Ferrucci, that was born I lost the year, sorry, I just asked, make your pardon. That's a few years ago was the century, and you can see the image of the reference of the way that they used to magnify the 1 century of his born, if I don't make a mistake. And actually, he arrived in Bangkok in 1924, if I don't make a mistake, and he left there. He decided to stay there, and he was hired to modernize and to bring European techniques and a way of showing, way of produce modern art. And actually he arrived there and he produced an exchange of art. What is really interesting, and he changed his name, and he's largely connected with and well-known. His references are frequently on the Thai name, that's Silpa Birarsi, and actually he founded, he was the first director of the School of Fine Arts. That was done in 1938, and in 1943 changed in the University of Silpakhorn. That allowed me to make a little nice reference to the next speakers, that an assistant professor at that university. And he left and he stayed there. He spent there the whole of his life. So actually he shared directly on his own life the experience and the art in between Western countries and Thailand. So I'm a little bit approximative and fast, but I hope to have given you an image of the Italian presence there, present in Siam and then in Thailand during the last centuries. This is an image that showed a group of the Italian architect there with a typical local way of dressing for Western, of course. And what is still there is the architecture that you will have the chance to see during the next trip there. So I suppose to not to have spoken too much, and I will stop here. I'll thank you for listening.